Right, well, I think we've got a good list of attendees here, so I'll just kick things off. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on the implementation and accreditation of the UKCA regime. My name is Matt Ireland, and I work in the Goods Regulation team of the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. And together with my colleagues, Laura Bedford and Ben Luckin, as well as Paul Greenwood from the UK Accreditation Service, we'll be hosting this event today. So before I talk through the agenda, please just be aware that we will be recording this webinar. So this afternoon, over the next hour, we're going to cover 4 areas. Firstly, Laura will talk through the details of the recently announced extension of the UKCA standstill period. Following this, Paul will outline the accreditation process for becoming a UK approved body. Next, Laura will speak about BEIS's priorities over the coming months, in particular around addressing CAB capacity and improving business readiness. And finally, we'll run through answers to some questions that attendees provided ahead of this event. In addition, if you have any further questions during the event, please put these in the Q&A function rather than the general chat. And following the session, UKAS will make available answers to these questions, as well as a recording for the session. So without any further delay, I think I'll pass over to Laura now for the first item. Laura?
Thanks, Matt, and hello, everybody. So my name's Laura Bedford, and I'm a colleague in Matt's team working on UKCA delivery. So I'm just going to talk a bit about the extension to the UKCA standstill period before handing over to UKAS. So we very recently announced, of course, that we would extend the amount of time we were giving businesses to adopt the UKCA marking, and that this was in response to kind of feedback from industry, because it remains clear that the pandemic is continuing to be challenging and impacting kind of the ability of businesses to prepare for the UKCA marking. So we will be introducing legislation which will allow businesses this additional year to adopt the UKCA marking. And during this time, of course, businesses can continue to use the CE marking to place products on the market in Great Britain. The UKCA marking will then be compulsory from the 1st of January 2023, and will then be a legal requirement to place a product on the market in Great Britain. So to be absolutely clear, this is the final deadline, and there's no intention from government to extend this further. And just to say as well, of course, that we recognise that this extra time isn't just for industry, it's also for government. So we will be doing more to continue to support industry to prepare, so supporting business readiness through kind of webinars and other kind of engagement, and through kind of guidance online, but also supporting conformity assessment bodies to increase capacity in areas where we know this is limited. And we'll touch on that a little bit more later after UKAS have done their presentation. So just to kind of be very clear about the key dates for the UKCA marking and its implementation. Of course, you can already do assessments for the UKCA marking now. That's been the case since the 1st of January 2021. But what, of course, is different is that period of time where businesses can continue to use the CE marking. They do have until the end of 2022. But then, of course, from the 1st of January 2023, the UKCA marking will be used for most goods. The only exception to this, of course, is medical devices. So medical devices have until the end of June 2023 to adopt the UKCA marking, but it's consistent across other product areas. So the other thing that we have also changed is the time until which you can place the UKCA marking on a product via a label or an accompanying document. So that has also been extended across most areas for a further 12 months. There are exceptions to this. So I think this includes kind of construction products, marine equipment, rail products, transportable pressure equipment and medical devices. But the exceptions are all listed on gov.uk, so it's worth having a look. And then, of course, from the 1st of January 2024, the UKCA marking must, in most cases, be affixed directly to products unless the legislation allows otherwise. So to be clear, we do see this as extra time for industry to prepare, but it's not time to sit back now and wait. So we are encouraging businesses in particular who do need to use the services of Conformity Assessment Body to get in touch as quickly as possible to make sure that they do have the right certificate of accreditation in place on time. So before we move on to the UKAS presentation, just a reminder, of course, that the rules are different for Northern Ireland, where the goods will need to meet EU regulatory requirements to be placed on the market for as long as the Northern Ireland Protocol is in place. So this means that the CE marking does continue to be the main marking, conformity marking for most new approach goods placed on the market in Northern Ireland. So businesses, of course, will continue to use this if they self-declare or if they use an EU notified body to carry out any mandatory conformity assessment that needs to be done. But of course, as hopefully you're aware, if a business is using a UK-based notified body, they will then need to use the CE plus UKNI marking. And these goods cannot be placed on the market in the EU 27 member states. So the UKNI marking, of course, is the additional conformity marking for products placed on the market in Northern Ireland, and it can never really be applied on its own, and it must always accompany the CE marking. The UKCA marking is also not valid for Northern Ireland. Businesses must use the CE or the CE plus UKNI marking. So I'll leave it there for now. I'm now going to hand over to Paul from UKAS to deliver the next part of the presentation. Paul, over to you.
Thanks, Laura. My name is Paul Greenwood. I'm the UKAS Operations Director. I'm going to talk a little bit about UKCA marking and the role of UKAS. Accreditation supports notification and UKCA in particular. So I'll talk a little bit about what UKAS is and how we do what we need to do. Now, Laura, you're driving the presentation, so if I could ask you to go to the next slide, that would be great. A little bit about UKAS. UKAS is the UK's sole national accreditation body, and we are appointed under a statutory instrument. So we're not part of government, but we work on behalf of government under a memorandum of understanding with BEIS. It's a public authority activity, and we do work in the public interest. We're not for profit, so whilst we do make a small profit, we do reinvest that into more accreditation products and services to continue to maintain accreditation as a mechanism for ensuring confidence in products and services. UKAS is itself a member of international forums. So our local region is the European Cooperation for Accreditation. So we work with mutual collaboration with the EA, which means that we talk regularly with neighbouring accreditation bodies in Germany, France, around Europe. But we're also members of IAF, which is the International Accreditation Forum, and the International Laboratory Accreditation Corporation. So we have these mutual recognition agreements around the world. So accreditation that's bestowed by UKAS is accepted overseas. Next slide, please, Laura. Talk a little bit about the accreditation process and application. All of the information I'm going to talk about is available on our website, www.ukas.com. But I'll kind of go through it in a little bit more detail just so that it's clear what's actually required to make your application. We have a series of application forms. So we have the main application form, which is the information about your company, and then what we call an AC form, and that depends on the type of activity that you want to undertake. So if you're a certification body, you would need to complete an AC1 form, an inspection body completes an AC2, and testing or calibration laboratories fill in an AC4. In addition to that, we have a UKAS agreement, which is our terms and conditions and the terms on which we agree to work. And we also have a confidentiality waiver for approved bodies. So in the event that we identify issues as part of our accreditation, that allows us to talk to the competent authority, highlight those issues, whether they be complaints, non-conforming work, or anything else that might affect accreditation and therefore appointment as a CA body. And there is also an application fee of £1,500. When you apply for accreditation, it's a requirement that you make contact or establish contact with the relevant competent authority. UKAS and the assessment manager who's assigned to you will remind you that you need to do that. And in many cases, we will keep the relevant competent authorities updated with lists of people who have applied. So it is an incumbent responsibility on the applicant to contact the local competent authority. Okay, next slide. Thank you, Laura. So how do we actually go about what we're doing? When an application is received, we will appoint a specific assessment manager who will take you through the entire process. So you'll have one point of contact at UKAS. So you've not got people contacting you from all sorts of different areas of the business. That assessment manager will bring together the right competent team. So they will identify the elements that you've applied for accreditation for. They will look at our resource pool in terms of technical assessors, and they'll make sure that we deploy the right team for the right amount of time to ensure that we can assess your organisation robustly and appropriately. We do offer a pre-assessment visit, and whilst those aren't mandatory, they do give really good value for money. The fundamental thing about an accreditation body is that we cannot, in our remit, we cannot provide consultation. And this is an opportunity at a pre-assessment visit for us to talk quite openly, really, about areas that we've identified that need attention before we progress to an actual assessment of your organisation against the requirements as laid out in the notifications or against international standards. We will then conduct a desk review, so making sure that you're ready to actually enter into that first stage of the assessment process. And so we'll ask you for a lot of information to allow us to conduct that assessment. What I would say is that if you're applying as an overseas body or that you already have accreditation in another area of the world, we can take into account the assessment reports that have been conducted on your organisation by your local accreditation body, which might save some time in the long run of the accreditation process. Having done that desk review, making sure that everything is in place, we move to an initial assessment, and that's conducted by a lead assessor who is normally the assessment manager that we've appointed and your unique point of contact within UKAS. And they will bring along that team of qualified assessors, experts, that competent group of individuals to assess your organisation against the requirements of the standards. Next slide, please, Laura. So how's the visit take place? Well, the initial assessment does start with an opening meeting. So we make sure that the lead assessor has got a clear picture and that we're all in agreement as to the scope of the assessment and against which criteria the assessment will be conducted. Following that opening meeting and any discussions, concerns, or anything that might have arisen, the assessment team generally will split up a little bit and go and look at various elements of the organisation. At the moment, we're conducting quite a few assessments remotely, so that might mean that two of our assessors go off and talk to one member of your staff, but the lead assessor maybe talks to your quality manager. But if it's a site visit, it may be that they go to different areas of your site to look at different activities. And again, some of these might be required to be conducted at client sites. So, you know, if you're certifying a product, we may need to go with you to watch that activity in place. And those visits can be split. So we don't need to do them all at the same time. We can do your head office assessment and then go and look at what we'd call a witnessed assessment as and when they become available. So again, we will look at real work as it's ongoing. Once all of that's been done, we'll discuss all of the information as it becomes available during the visit. So any concerns, any issues that get raised, those will be raised during the course of the visit. We don't present those as a fait accompli at the end. We will discuss them with you. But we do have a closing meeting to wrap up so that everyone's aware, everybody's happy about the outcome of the assessment. And ultimately, that will include a recommendation on whether accreditation can be offered. As I say, generally, there will be things that need resolution, and those will be discussed and raised as non-conformities, and those will need to be sorted out before we can actually grant that accreditation. Timeframes, we actually give customers 3 months to complete those non-conformities, so provide evidence that they've taken effective corrective action. Obviously, you can close those out as quickly as you want. So I think just bearing in mind all of these sort of to and fro, please be thinking, get an application in for accreditation as soon as possible to give you the maximum amount of time for us to do this process, pass information backwards and forwards and so on. When all of those non-conformities have been addressed, an independent decision maker will make a decision as to whether accreditation can be granted. As part of that decision-making process, the decision maker will then inform the local competent authority that our accreditation has been granted and that we are recommending that the organisation becomes a UKCA organisation. So we'll send all of those details over to the competent authority. The competent authority will look at our report, they'll look at the non-conformities, they'll make sure that everything's clear and that they're happy with our recommendation. And they will then make their own decision on approval. Once they've made their decision on approval, they will send a letter of appointment and they will create a unique identification number. And the body's details will be put onto the UK Market CAB database. So that's UKMCAB. Next slide, please, Laura. So once you become accredited, we operate a 4-year rolling cycle of assessment activity to make sure that competence and confidence can be maintained on an ongoing basis. And during that period, we will come and do assessments. Those may be remote, they may be on site, but we'll discuss and agree that programme with you. Generally, those are conducted annually, but we're currently going through a programme where we're looking at a risk-based approach where it may be that we're able to reduce that frequency or look at different ways of delivering the assessment based on the risk posed by the organisation. With a newly accredited organisation, we will always come and do our first assessment 6 months after grant of accreditation. And the reason we come 6 months after grant of accreditation is that is generally sort of about 9 months since the last time we saw you, because of that 3-month period where you're sending your evidence into us. So it gives us a bit of an opportunity to see how you've started operating and to get a bit of data into your systems and really test those management systems. In the 4th year of the cycle, we'll conduct a reassessment, and that's similar in depth to the initial assessment. So we go into a little bit more detail. We make sure that we've covered everything that we need to look at during our 4-year cycle. And then we will make another decision to renew accreditation for the further 4 years. There's no need to reapply. All of this happens automatically and will be discussed with you as we go along. And at any point during your assessment cycle over the 4 years, you can apply for an extension to scope. So again, you do need to fill in one of those AC forms I mentioned at the top of the presentation, but you can apply at any time and we'll process that. as I mentioned before, if UKAS becomes aware of information that might have an impact, we're duty bound to inform the relevant competent authority, and that's where that confidentiality waiver kicks in. Okay, next slide, please, Laura. As I say, all of this information is on the UKAS website, and I've put some useful links in there. I think one of the questions I'd seen in the Q&A was, will these be available after the webinar is completed? And I believe that that's right, that they will be. And again, just keep an eye on the UKAS website. There are specific courses for UKCA and applicants for UKCA yet to be confirmed. I've got a couple more slides, so if you could just cover those. Next one, please, Laura. So there is a requirement that organisations who are applying for UKCA are established in the UK, registered at Companies House. They have the legal responsibility, the rights, the insurances, all of those things that have to be in place. So we will check to make sure that an organisation is appropriately established. Yeah, I think that this is really for overseas organisations who want to apply to be UKCA. There is one, I think, area which is pyrotechnics, where at the moment you do not need to have a physical location in the UK. But I think generally we're still at the position where we'll be looking for organisations to have some kind of base in the UK. For those organisations who are in the UK who want to apply for accreditation but use resource which is based overseas, if you could go to the next slide, Laura, it is possible for them to draw on resources in other areas of their businesses. So again, as long as the when the UKCA work is being conducted, the employees are working on behalf of the UK organisation, it's absolutely fine if you've got people who are placed in Italy or Spain or any other country, as long as they're being used within your own management system. So again, we've had quite a lot of applications or queries from UK-based conformity assessment bodies. Can we apply for UKCA accreditation, knowing that our entire team is based in the Netherlands or France? Absolutely fine, but how are you going to control it? And that's what we will assess when we come and do that assessment to make sure that everything's valid and fit for purpose. So I think that's probably me about finished. I'm sure that'll raise some questions, but thank you for your time and for your patience with my presentation. And I'll pass back to Laura.
Thanks, Paul. So I'm just going to talk a bit about kind of BEIS's priorities over the coming months. So as I mentioned kind of at the start, it is the government's priority that we do support CABs to expand in areas where there is insufficient capacity. So we are working very closely with UKAS to undertake a programme of engagement over the coming weeks to better understand the barriers that UK CABs are facing to increase testing and certification capacity, and also to understand the plans of conformity assessment bodies to expand into the UK market. So this process has already begun. So we've already begun reaching out to many of you to request your participation in this exercise. And we would very much appreciate, of course, your involvement in this. The focus of this engagement is really primarily with any CABs that cover regulations where we have identified there is insufficient capacity. And as you can see on the slide, those areas, kind of the 5 that are particularly affected, of course, are construction products, pyrotechnics, cableways, outdoor noise, and lifts. So that's kind of where the focus is. As noted, of course, at the bottom of this slide, this programme of engagement will help to inform the development of potential government policy interventions, should these be required if we feel the market isn't expanding. Our second kind of focus is also kind of business readiness. So in addition, of course, to the CAB engagement work, it's very important that businesses are ready for the UKCA marking. and can continue to supply goods onto the market in Great Britain. So we've done quite a lot of work on this already, running various webinars and events. And our research does suggest that awareness is improving in the UK. But of course, we want to make sure that businesses have taken action. And we are very concerned, of course, as well about overseas businesses, making sure that they have awareness, because our kind of stakeholder engagement suggests that international suppliers are not necessarily ready for the UKCA marking. We've produced various materials to help businesses understand the key actions that they need to take. And we'll be running further webinars to be published, I think, online in the next couple of weeks to kind of cover key questions and areas. And we would, of course, welcome support from conformity assessment bodies to engage with your clients and share materials and opportunities to attend events run by us with them as well. So we do actually have a few questions which we would like conformity assessment bodies to consider. So I'm going to bring these up onto the screen now. So there are 3 questions really that we're interested in getting some thoughts on. And we'll be posting a survey link in the meeting chat for you to follow. But the 3 kind of key questions really are, what barriers do you see to expansion or entry into testing and certifying for the UKCA marking? Do you have any initial views as to what government could be doing to support cabs in those sectors where there is limited testing capacity? And number 3, of course, would cabs like to see more regular government cab events in the future? And what would you like to see from these? So we'll be posting a survey link for you to use to kind of answer those questions and give us your thoughts. But that's everything we're going to say, I think, presentation-wise. So Matt, if you're around, I will hand over to you to do the Q&A.
Great, thanks, Laura.
I just pressed the wrong button there.
All good. So yeah, we're just going to run through a few of the questions that we received ahead of this event from attendees. But again, please do post any additional questions you have in the Q&A function. So the first question is, has any decision been made on whether existing AVCP System 3 test reports issued by an EU notified body in support of CE marking under the CPR can be used as the basis of an equivalent test report issued by a GB-based approved body in support of UKCA marking? So I think Ben, resident expert, should be able to help with an answer to this first one.
Thanks very much, Matt. And also we have Ahad from the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities here as well, just to fill in if I miss anything out for them. But essentially, I understand they're assessing the situation around AVCP System 3 and will be providing an update on the policy once they have agreed an approach. But as it currently stands, test reports under AVCP System 3 issued by an EU notified body cannot be used in support of the UKCA mark.
Great, thanks, Ben. The second question that we had through was, does this extension of the standstill period mean a delay of 1 year on all phases?
Thanks, Matt. So I wasn't entirely clear on what all phases meant in this context, but essentially what we're saying to industry is, get UKCA certification as soon as possible so that you are ready to place products on the market after the 31st of December 2022 in a way that is compliant with UKCA requirements. So what we'd be saying is, if a business needs to get UKCA certification, to complete all relevant aspects of that process well in advance of the 31st of December 2022.
Great, thanks, Ben. So the third question that we had here was, when will the Secretary of State for BEIS deliver the decision on legally mandated coordination activities for approved bodies?
Yeah, BEIS has been considering the issue of conformity assessment body coordination functions as part of our product safety review, and with that would welcome thoughts and views of industry. Where industry has set up its own coordination functions and invites the Office of Product Safety Standards to those meetings, we are attending as BEIS and the Office of Product Safety and Standards to provide guidance and input on the issues raised. And so far, we've attended coordination meetings with the pressure equipment, PP and ATEX sectors in the last few weeks. So in terms of the exact timings around that will depend on when we make the announcements and the outputs are announced following the product safety review. But we are actively and currently engaging with sectors who are already taking the initiative to set up coordination activities for their areas.
Great, thanks, Ben. So the next one we had was, how will BEIS ensure that HSE trading standards and other such bodies have joined up thinking in their market surveillance activities?
Yep, so BEIS has already established a market surveillance governance group to ensure that there is consistency of approach in regards to market surveillance activities, and within this group includes membership of the Health and Safety Executive, the Department for Transport and other authorities operating within the UK.
Great, thanks. So another one here, will BEIS provide enhanced guidance for the definition of placement on the market with examples and work scenarios to support economic operators as the new 31 December date approaches?
Yes, absolutely. We're actively working on updated guidance currently, which explores various placing on the market scenarios. In particular, it looks to address issues around spares, components, and the roles and responsibilities of economic operators. So we're currently finalising that now with a view to publishing very soon.
Great, thanks, Ben. So the next one we have was the EU has changed how harmonised standards are published, including a section for restrictions. This was not defined. Will BEIS consult industry before changes to the designation process are made?
So the designation process is outlined on gov.uk, and if any changes are made to this process, our guidance on gov.uk will be updated accordingly. So what we do is we encourage stakeholders to sign up for the Office of Product Safety and Standards email alerts further to this page. And if changes are made, they will receive a notification regarding any updates and changes to information. So we'll provide a link to this gov.uk page in the chat function.
Great, thanks, Ben. So the next one here was relating to the pressure equipment safety regulations. Will guidance be issued on the process to be adopted for transferring type approval and quality certification, NDT personnel certification, and permanent joining qualifications from EU notified bodies to UK approved bodies at the end of the standstill period?
Yep, so on this question, the Office of Product Safety and Standards are meeting with representatives from conformity assessment bodies and industry. And in the coming weeks, there will be further meetings between the OPSS and industry to understand how best we can support activity in this area and where specific guidance is required, because we understand it's an issue.
Great, thanks. Another one here, are there any plans to introduce a fast track process or alternative less rigorous procedure for UKCA approval of products which have already been CE certified?
The responsibility of individual UK cabs to ensure themselves that the products for which they're issuing certificates for are compliant with the relevant requirements. But as government, we're not telling cabs that they necessarily need to retest and fully reassess a product or a process before a new certificate is issued, because ultimately UK and EU essential requirements are currently the same. So we're encouraging the sector to consider alternatives, including reviewing existing documentation and, for example, providing or performing targeted activities to verify conformity assessment results, where, for example, a review of available documentation isn't sufficient. So we're encouraging conformity assessment bodies to, take a pragmatic approach to this. Is their ultimate responsibility, but we're not suggesting that all testing, for example, needs to be repeated.
Thanks very much. Someone again here, can you confirm that approved bodies would be expected to carry out their normal file review and examination procedures and not just provide a certificate or a letter of approval based solely on a CE certificate?
I think in practice, this depends on if you are an approved body, what you're comfortable doing, because ultimately you are responsible for issuing the UKCA certification. So if this is your normal process, it'd be encouraged to adopt that. But if you're comfortable with the information you're receiving in the CE certification, we wouldn't insist in that situation that you undertake a full and detailed review of things. It's all depends on where the information's from, what kind of products covered, and what you're comfortable with as an individual approved body.
All right, that makes sense. So question 10 here, can you confirm applications for approved body status from European certification bodies are given by the same level of scrutiny and obligations as UK certification bodies were subjected to by the European Commission? I think this one's probably actually for Paul from UKAS to come in on.
Yeah, I think there are several levels on this question. In terms of the scrutiny and obligations, we have traditionally accredited organisations in support of notification. So absolutely, there is no difference in the assessment that's performed, nor between the assessments that are performed by ourselves, COFRAC, DAX, any of those other European accreditation bodies. Obviously, we've got some very sharp mechanisms to make sure that we are consistent in our application. Now, I don't know whether there were additional scrutinies put in place by the European Commission, but certainly, the scrutiny and obligations are identical, down to the fact that UK bodies can't be notified bodies in Europe if they're not physically located there. So again, that's something that I believe BEIS are looking at for the UK as to whether that is going to continue to be a requirement. But from an assessment and accreditation perspective, absolutely the same level of scrutiny exists across the board.
Great, thanks for that, Paul. And I think the final question that we got ahead of the session was regarding the structure of approved body coordination groups. Are there any plans for a government-supported approved body group in the PPE sector? Can I come back to you, Ben, on this one?
Yeah, of course. So the answer to this one really is the same as the previous answer as regards, when we're going to deliver a decision on legally mandated cooperation coordination bodies. Apologies. So we've already recently attended meetings that have been set up by industry and will continue to do so. And with regards to formal plans, we will update on that in due course following the outcome of the product safety review.
Great, thanks, Ben. I see in the Q&A function we've had a few more questions come through, a couple of which have already been answered, but we have two open ones here. One is, can a UK CAB use a test report issued by an accredited EU laboratory for the UKCA certification? Can I maybe come to you, Paul, on that one?
Sorry, trying to unmute myself. Can a UKCAB use a test report issued by an accredited EU laboratory for UKCA? It depends what it's for, but in general, I would say yes, because there is a mutuality of assessment. So a test result obtained overseas should be mutually agreeable, but obviously there's an element of contract review in there to make sure that test result is fit for purpose for what the activity being performed actually is. So it's I'm sorry, it's a standard UKAS response. It depends, but yes, generally we will accept test reports.
Great, thanks for that, Paul. And I think the one remaining question that we've got through today was, is the OPSS email alerts generic to all industries, or may it be targeted to those of interest? Ben, can I turn to you on this one?
Yeah, of course. So to be honest with you, it depends on what the update is. So there will be some that are generic to all, and there will be some that are targeted to specific standards, for example. And that's not a super helpful answer, but basically, the updates will be relevant to certain sectors sometimes.
Great, thanks, Ben. So I think that's covered the Q&A section of the session today. But again, if you do have any further questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A function and we can come back to you following the session. We'll also provide written responses to questions as well. I see we've actually had one more come through now. So this one is, can UKAS support us in gaining EU accreditation as an inspection body to continue our EU service exchange activities? Would you be able to take that one, Paul?
Sorry, it's just disappeared off my list. Can UKAS support us in gaining EU accreditation as an inspection body to continue our EU service exchange activities? Mark, could I pick that up with you offline? I mean, we'll always, try and help organisations get accreditation wherever they need it. So, yeah, I mean, if you've already got accreditation with UKAS, is that something that can be used overseas? We'd need to investigate that a little bit further. But Mark, if you want to contact me, that's absolutely fine. I'll try and pick up your contact details and drop you a line.
Thanks, Paul. Oh, I think we've got one more through. So this one is, it has been stated that BEIS will support approved bodies to increase capacity. How precisely will this be done? Capital investment, skilled worker resourcing? Ben, am I able to come to you for this one?
Yeah, of course. So we're currently exploring what we can do to increase capacity, and in the form we post a link to in the chat, would welcome views on these types of questions. But we're looking at a number of things. For example, making the process clearer through guidance. We're looking at working with UKAS to fast track applications in areas where we do have capacity issues. So this is something we're actively looking at and are keen to hear views from the sector on.
Great, thanks, Ben. So again, following the session, we'll provide some written answers to these questions as well, so you can refer back to them, as well as the recording for this session itself. So once again, thank you very much for attending this event. Hopefully it's been useful for you, and please do remember to provide us some feedback on the short survey questions that are linked to in the chat. It'd be really great to hear your views on those, and we look forward to hopefully engaging with the sector again soon. So once again, thank you very much, and hope you have a great rest of your Tuesday afternoon. Bye.